very interesting to show you. Remember the Maimon who came across a piece which I asked all the experts in the room if they knew any explanation, and nobody really knew. But Tzemach Tzedek said that he used as a mushal, just like a baby is born, even though the sperm cell contains all the organs of the body, but in initial stages, anything can become anything in money. And then later things become what they become. Remember that, right? So I asked somebody who was a brilliant scientist, biologist like me, and he didn't know the answer, but he went to what is it called? GBT? ChatGPT. So here it is. Everyone could look at it. It'll explain it very good. I'll read to you what it says. I don't know if there's enough copies. But it says that there's something called embryonic stem cells. What is it? It's present in the earliest days after fertilization. And they can turn into any cell type in the body. What? Not the answer?
That's how they try and treat cancer.
Oh, that's how the stem cells. Right. So it says this stage is very brief. Once the embryo implants and begins forming tissues, the cells start specializing, and then it starts being something specific, and then you can't change it. That's exactly what it says in the Maimon. I was looking up, when did they discover stem cells? Because the Maimon was written by the Tzemach Tzedek. That was written how many, over 100 and something years ago. Stem cells were not known yet, because they think. I looked it up. That's very interesting. There's a story with the Little Rebbe that he was once, no, it was the Rebbe Rashab, was once washing to eat, and his brother was very excited, had a paper with to show him. Wait, what? Calm down. He showed him that there's a report now in science that there's one nerve in the brain that this is connected to thinking deeply about things, and another nerve in the brain that's connected to memory. And that's when people want to think deeply about something, they have it up in their head, and that causes the nerve to go in that direction, to activate it more. And when people try to remember something, or the other way around, they put their head down, because that makes the nerve go the other direction. So Rebbe Rashab said, wait a second, he pulled out a mimer from the Mitzvah Rebbe 50 years earlier, and he says exactly that. So he said, how do you know? He wasn't a doctor. But he says, everything down here evolves from up there. So being that he knew what's going on up there, it must be down here. Well, this Tzemach Tzedek, I'm pretty sure it was written before anyone knew anything about these stem cells. Yeah. Okay. So now I want to finish something which we didn't cover about Yom Kippur, and then we'll go back to Simchas Torah. And that is one of the things which is on Yom Kippur, and it happens in Lubavitch specifically, is that after the davening is over, on Yom Kippur, actually I shouldn't say after the davening is over, before it's over. So what happens at the end of Yom Kippur, we have this page here, which shows what we say. Everyone shouts together. It's on page 23. Everyone, at the end of the davening, the last davening is called Ne'ilah, the fifth prayer. And Ne'ilah means the closing of the doors, that the doors close. The doors which were open for Yom Kippur are now closed. Everyone screams from the depth of their heart, Shema Yisrael, one time. And then Baruch Shem Kvod Malchus Adonai 3 times. And then Hashem Hu Elokim 7 times. Basically, all these 3 verses are declaring, Hashem's kingdom, Hashem's sovereignty in different ways. And all of them really imply that not only we Yidden, but the whole world accepts Hashem's sovereignty. What happens after that? After that, if you look at the page, you see then the Chazan starts saying Kaddish. After he finishes halfway, then they blow the shofar. This is not like Rosh Hashanah. This is not the same obligation like Rosh Hashanah, but they blow the shofar just one tkiyah, one long, loud sound. And then the whole shul together shouts out, Roshana Haba B'Yerushalayim. So in Chabad, the custom is that before they blow the shofar, we sing a song which is called Napoleon's March. Most people, the first time they hear about it, don't understand how does Napoleon come into the shul, and yet Napoleon on Yom Kippur, and yet at the Ila, and right before the blowing of the shofar. So the history behind this is that it's not just an ordinary story, because the Alter Rebbe, in looking at things in the natural order, the Derech HaTeva, lost his life because of this, which means there was the war going on between Russia and France, the Tsar and Napoleon. And the Alter Rebbe said then that Napoleon is like the sort of super klipa of the whole world at that time. He was the one who was spreading a lot of the modern ideas that we have today. In other words, it wasn't just to be liberated from kings and monarchs. His thing was to be liberated from any kind of sort of authority, including Hashem. He didn't believe in Hashem, and he didn't believe that there's anything that you have to, follow in that sense. And to this day, a lot of the things that go on in the modern way of thinking is all a result of that revolution. So we had a war with Russia, and that war with Russia, there was a difference of opinion between the Alter Rebbe and another great tzaddik of that time. And the story has many details, which I'll talk about it when we come to that time in the year, when the Alter Rebbe was nostalgic. But that tzaddik and some tzaddikim believed that they would pray for Napoleon to win, because he promised freedom, and that there won't be Jews could join all the colleges, universities, can have the job like everybody else. And the Alter Rebbe prayed that the Tsar should win. The Tsar wasn't a big tzaddik either, but the Tsar believed in God. And even though Yidden suffered under him, but Yidden would maintain their faith under him. Under Napoleon, the Alter Rebbe said if Napoleon would have won the war, God forbid, then atheism would spread to the whole world. So the Alter Rebbe prayed that he should lose the war. What happened at the end was, as we know, Napoleon lost the war. But there's an interesting story there that Alter Rebbe later said that it was declared in heaven that whoever of the two blows shofar first on Rosh Hashanah will have it his way. So the other tzaddik, he got up as early as he possibly can. He started davening as early as he possibly can. Against his nature, he davened as fast as he possibly can. And he grabbed the shofar. And as soon as he took the shofar, he said, too late. The Alter Rebbe got me. He was ahead of me. How did the Alter Rebbe manage to blow shofar before him? The Alter Rebbe blew shofar before davening. As soon as he woke up, he blew shofar. The Rebbe told the story many times that sometimes you don't follow the regular order when there's a crisis of sorts. But anyway, if you know the history a little bit, there was a point when Napoleon did penetrate into Russia, and it looked like he was going to win. Then later he had to retreat, and later he was defeated and humiliated and whatever. But when he went into Russia, the Chassidim came running to Alter Rebbe and said to Alter Rebbe, why did I say the Alter Rebbe's passing is connected to this? Because Alter Rebbe said that he's a very big klipa, and I don't want to be under his jurisdiction whatsoever. Alter Rebbe knew that he's coming to his town, so he left the town, and he was on the run basically the whole time. In fact, Napoleon, who was a sorcerer, that's what it says in the Simchas, knew that the Alter Rebbe spiritually is fighting him, and he actually had men go out and search for the Alter Rebbe because he wanted to capture him. The Alter Rebbe was on the run for many months. It was a cold winter in Russia. That's how the Alter Rebbe got very sick, and he passed away. So in Derech HaTeva, his passing away was a result of running away from Napoleon. That's what happened. But at a certain point, when he went into Russia, and now people kept running to Alter Rebbe, but you promised us that he's going to lose the war. Alter Rebbe said this is temporary. And Alter Rebbe actually made an oath. He was wearing his tefillin, and he made an oath that he swears that he will lose, and he'll retreat, and he'll be defeated completely. So nobody should panic. And then the Alter Rebbe said to the Chassidim, what was the marching song of victory that they sang when they went into Russia? So they sang the song, which was that march of victory. The Alter Rebbe said it is a true song. In other words, the song really, truly expresses victory. But sof kol sof, that zayim didan natzah, which means, but eventually our side will be victorious. You must have heard the words didan natzah, which is not just from this story, it's actually found in the Medrash, with the idea of didan natzah. That when Yidden shout didan natzah, that in itself could bring victory over enemies. So that means that this song represents the Dan Natzah, being that we're on trial, starting from Rosh Hashanah, and now comes Yom Kippur, the end of the trial, so to speak. So we sing the Dan Natzah, being that, and Alter Rebbe made it into a Hasidic shanig, which means Alter Rebbe elevated this song, which came from a klipa, which was Napoleon, and the Alter Rebbe made it into a nigun, which is being used to inspire. And after Yom Kippur, when we're coming to the end, we sing the song, meaning that we can be coming out victorious from this trial of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But what's the point of saying it? So if you remember, not that long ago, we had a class on Sukkot, and one of the explanations to the lulav was that years ago, when a person went to trial and he won the case, he would walk out with a spear of victory. That was what it was called. So the Medrash said, we too are in trial. And on Sukkot, we say, Didan Natzach. So we carry a lulav, that's like our spear of victory, declaring we won. But then the question we asked was, who are we declaring it to? If we won, we won. If we didn't win, we didn't win. But what is the being accomplished by carrying the lulav? Who are we telling this to? So we explained then, it's not just telling it to people. It means that by holding the lulav, the nesrig, the brachas, and the good results of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur are brought down to the bottom line that it manifests with Gashmias. That's the real mitzvah. In other words, even if Hashem, and He surely does give everyone brachas, for Gashmias, for Ruchnias, for everything, for children, all the brachas we need, that they're coming down from a spiritual place, and we need them to be translated and transformed into Gashmis, into food, into clothing, into happiness, into health. And that's the real Nitzachim, because there's still things blocking. And therefore, when we have the Lulav and Esrog, that's something which is instrumental in that. It's not just a symbol. It's instrumental in bringing it down to the level of Gashmis. So in a sense, this starts on Yom Kippur. When Yom Kippur is over. And it comes through the nigun of Didan Natzach and through declaring Didan Natzach. But the Rebbe, this was a special time, and the Rebbe did something which is very, very unusual, and that is that the Rebbe would get up on his chair, and from his chair he would be waving his hand for everyone to sing, but not just waving his hand like that. It was very, very strong. The Rebbe's whole face got covered with a talus. And this after a fasting, and then it would go on for a number of minutes and then calm down. In the later years, the Rebbe would stand on a platform, so he didn't need a chair. But then the crowd came so big, so the Rebbe stood up on the chair on the platform. And then later, that wasn't enough either, so you'll see if you go to 770, they have like a little staircase. The Rebbe would go up those stairs, be very high up, and from there he would the Rebbe's face at that time was usually fiery red. Then you couldn't see it because it was all covered with the talus. And once Yom Kippur was over, everything switched. What does it mean switch? Now the Rebbe would go out of davening, he would 3 times shout B'jantiv, and the whole crowd answered B'jantiv, and then a second time, a third time. And this was the turning point in Tishrei. If you remember, not remember, but you have this this little drawing that I made in the back about how we're climbing the ladder. So you'll see it says, this is a pasuk. Alter Rebbe says, "Smoili tachas areishi, Hashem loved me. His left arm is under my head. The immediate and with his right arm he embraces me." So that explains that from here until Yom Kippur, that's the left arm. That's the Hura. That's the time that we do tshuva, tears, a broken heart. After that starts, you mean the Chapkeni, Hashem embraces us with the right hand. That everything goes into the Simcha mode, and from day to day, the Simcha only gets bigger and bigger. And these terms that with the right hand he embraces me has another meaning to it. I know I'm just throwing things at you, but hopefully you'll remember that it says that the sukkah is Hashem's embrace. Halacha is that a sukkah is kosher if it has 3 walls. It doesn't need 4 walls. 3 is what's necessary. So it's explained in Kabbalah what are the 3 walls, because the sukkah represents Hashem's embrace. The arm has 3 parts to it. The first part is the wrist. Second part is from the wrist to the elbow, and the third part is from the elbow to the shoulder. So too, the walls of the sukkah, which represent Hashem's embrace, has to have 3 walls, which represent these 3 parts. And that begins Hashem showing us his right hand, which is openly his love, and therefore it's open simcha from our end. That starts mainly right after Yom Kippur. And up until Yom Kippur is the other Avodah, the Avodah of Meriras, of bitterness and regret and remorse and tshuva and so on and so forth. Even though now, even Yom Kippur we have a simcha, but that's a special thing that goes on now in our generation. That's one thing that I wanted to talk about Yom Kippur. Another thing is, one of the highlights of Yom Kippur in the Chumash is the 2 goats. One of the 2 goats that they took 2 goats and they drew lots. And you have it on page, the pasuk in the Chumash. It's on page 33. And you will take 2 goats. They should be male goats. Stand them before Hashem at the entrance of the Ohel Moed, which is the Mishkan. And Aaron HaKohen will put 2 lots on the goats. One lot will say, this is for Hashem, and one lot will say, this is La'azazel. And this was done on Yom Kippur, and this is considered one of the highlights of the Avodah on Yom Kippur, the drawing of lots. First of all, by the way, I just wanted to say, today's day, even though it's not a yontif or anything, but it's an historic day. This is the day, I mentioned it at night by the gathering, that the 8th day of Tishrei is when Shlomo HaMelech finished building the Beis HaMikdash, the first Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, and the celebrations began. And he celebrated for 14 days. From today until the end of Sukkot, and the celebration was so amazing that people ate and drank on Yom Kippur. And some people were worried maybe they did the wrong thing. So there was a heavenly voice that we all heard, which said, whoever participated in the celebration on Yom Kippur is granted a share in the world to come. That's why we say when Mashiach comes, we won't be fasting Tisha B'Av, we won't be fasting, but those days, Tisha B'Av we fast because we're mourning. Asar B'Tevis we don't fast, we fast because we're mourning. Those fasts because of destruction. But Yom Kippur is different. There's a famous quote from Rabbi Yitzchak Barditcher. They said the difference between Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur. By the way, these are the only 2 fast days that are pretty much identical in halacha, except for Yom Kippur is Midoraisa, is in the Torah, and Tisha B'Av was by the sages. But halachically, that's both 24 hours, and the severity is pretty much similar. and that it's not so easy to get exempt from this. But he said the difference is, and I'll say it in Yiddish first, then I'll explain it. He said when it comes to Tisha B'Av, the kenmenes. When it comes to Yom Kippur, what's darkness? How would we translate that? On Tisha B'Av, how can you eat? On Yom Kippur, who needs to eat? In other words, on Yom Tisha B'Av, we're so broken that we have no appetite to eat. On Yom Kippur, we're on such a high, who needs to eat? We're like malachim, we're like angels. So if we're like angels, and that's a good thing, so even when Mashiach comes, maybe we'll be fasting. What we see from this story with Shlomo HaMelech, that when they built the Beis Hamikdash, the celebration was dafke eating and drinking the Gashmias because of celebrating Beis Hamikdash. So maybe it'll be the same thing when Mashiach comes. But anyway, let him come and figure it out. So there's something interesting about the whole idea of a girdle, of drawing lots. Now, you might not be aware of this, but the drawing of lots in the Beis Hamikdash wasn't only on Yom Kippur, it was every single day. Where was the drawing of lots every single day? Every single day, there had to be a lot of work divided amongst the Kohanim. Some Kohanim had to do, there were so many things to do in the Beis Hamikdash, and there were so many Kohanim, who does what? So there was a girdle, they had to choose. How did they choose? They stood in a half a circle, and they took a number, they counted, let's say they picked the number, whatever, 100, and they counted till 100, and then each job that was in the Beis Hamikdash had a number. So if you were number 101, you did job 101, you did job number 1. 2, you did job number 2. That's how they divided every day, who does what. So it says that a girdle is from Shamayim, which means the fact that in the Beis Hamikdash, when you are playing a game and you have to choose who's first, you flip a coin, you say, okay, odds or even, you do these things that you choose, it's random, whatever happens, happens. But in the Beis Hamikdash, it was Min HaShamayim. So the Rebbe brings down here, it's in the booklet, I brought it down on page 37, that it's brought down in the commentators of Torah, that whoever doesn't believe in the Goro, that it's from Shamayim, then it's no different than not believing in the Aseret HaDibros. The Goro that comes, it looks like it's random, but everything is from Hashem. So therefore, this is from Hashem, that you, Kohen, have to do this job, and that Kohen has to do that job, and the other Kohen does another job. In fact, this is one of the sources, it's also in the Sikha, that you didn't have a custom, and they don't know what to do. They open a book of Torah, open up to a certain page, and they look to see what it says on that page. We'll have a class on this, because that's another thing that needs clarification. But here it's brought down in the Sikha that it's a custom from years back, and actually the source of it and the origin is in the Shulchan Aruch, that people open a sefer and open it randomly, and then you look to see where it opened, and looking around there, that I feel is an indication from Shamayim what I should be doing. That's also called girdle, anything which is like just random. So I just want to explain what's so significant about it. So we have something in davening here in the booklet. It's page 36. We say it every morning, and there are probably hundreds of songs that were composed with these words because they're very beautiful words. The words are Ashreinu Matev Chalkeinu, Manoim Gerolenu, Mayofa Yerushaseinu. How good is our portion? How pleasant is our lot? And how beautiful is our heritage? So when it says how good is our portion, means thank you Hashem that you led me to Torah, to mitzvahs, and I have the opportunity to be your servant and learn Torah and do mitzvahs. When we say how good is our heritage, is that we're thankful to Hashem that this is the heritage we have from Avraham Avinu all the way down to our generation. But what does it mean when we say how pleasant is our lot? Who's drawing lots over here? there's no doubt that each term describes something else. When it says how good is our portion, it's one thing. How pleasant is our lot is a second thing. And how beautiful is our heritage is a third thing. So what does it mean by a lot? So there's actually a chapter in Tanya where the Alter Rebbe explains it. And he says the following: every Jew that's on this earth that ever lived, that will ever live, we all have the same, good morning, same spiritual mission: to learn Torah, to do mitzvahs, keep Shabbos, Matzah on Pesach, Shofar Rosh Hashanah, Simchas Torah, Yom Kippur. Everybody has the same thing. In addition to that, each individual has a very specific shlichus what they need to do during their lifetime, which is the main reason why Hashem sent their neshama down to this world. So the fact that we see this person became a rabbi and he gives halachic rulings, this person studies Kabbalah, this person is very involved in helping the poor, this person is very involved in something else, this person is a doctor, this person is a lawyer, this person is a shoemaker, this person doing something else. It turns out there were different reasons why they ended up doing what they did, but really it's part of the shlichus that Hashem sent us down to this world to elevate the world through one way or another way. So there's 8 billion people in this world. We have to understand it means that there's 8 billion shlichus, and every person has a reason why they're here. And based on what my shlichus is, that's the reason why I was born at this time in history, by these set of parents, in this country, on this and this time of life, and on this day, and even in this hour, and even in this minute. Everything is very precise. So, if somebody, for example, has a life of wealth, and another person has a life of poverty, what does that mean? That means it's my shlichus. Serving Hashem with a lot of wealth is a challenge, is a big nisayon, and of course that gives Hashem great pleasure that in spite of the fact that I have so much money, I'm still serving Him properly. A person is, God forbid, suffering poverty and serves Hashem, that's another kind of avodah. And of course, wealth and poverty could be in many different ways. But of course, the poor person says, Hashem, I know it's amazing, but why me? I'll do his job and let him do my job. So where did it come from that this is my job and this is his job? And the answer is, this is from Hashem, that this is my job and that's his job, and everybody has their job. And the truth is, everybody's greatest pleasure in life will be if I do the best that I can do in my shlichus, not if I do someone else's shlichus. Even though that person's shlichus looks like it's, wow, the most amazing thing, they accomplished so much, Hashem put me in a certain place, and Hashem put me in a certain situation, which means that this is giving Hashem the greatest pleasure, and that should give me the greatest pleasure, because I am fulfilling what Hashem wants from me. If Hashem wasn't in the picture, there's just a board of better jobs and worse jobs, I can understand. But if the whole thing is about Hashem, and He gives me the shlichus, but why? The answer to that question is, that's beyond. Even in the spiritual realm, it's beyond chokmah. In other words, just like when you draw lots, it's random. What does it mean random? There's no rhyme or reason why you go first. It's just, I said, whoever comes, we're going to count to 3, whoever's the third person on the line is going to be chosen. Has nothing to do with any reason. We did something random because somebody has to be the one to start. So, the Gashmi is random, means no reason, and therefore it's totally meaningless. The Ruchni is no reason means higher than reason. So the fact that I chose me to do my job and chose you to do your job comes from a place in the spiritual realm that's called a lot, that's higher than reason. And by the way, that's the connection to Yom Kippur. As we learned in the Maimon that Yom Kippur, where does atonement come from? From a place which is infinite and there's no limitation in time, no limitation in space, no limitation that all the things that I did and the damage I did and the defects that I caused, everything melts and everything disappears. And it comes from a place which is infinite and nothing really matters once I reach that spot. And that's connected to the Geirel. It's a place in the heavenly spiritual realm that's above and beyond even Chachma of Atzilus, beyond reason. And therefore, there's no limitations whatsoever. Okay. Now to jump back for a few minutes to Simchas Torah. One of the things where it's that it says in Hayom Yom is brought down that those who know the things to have in mind according to Kabbalah will find that the intentions in Kabbalah that are found in the prayers of Yom Kippur and Shoshana are identical to the ones that we have on Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. Which means in a certain way it's the same. The only difference is this is something which is accomplished through tshuva, through bitterness, and this is accomplished through simcha. In fact, these 2 days will always come out of the same days of the week. In other words, Rosh Hashanah this year was Tuesday and Wednesday, and Simchas Torah is also going to be Tuesday and Wednesday, same 2 days. And there's a famous story with the Rebbe Rashab. It was once bringing on Simchas Torah, and he was talking very strongly about improving and growing and being spiritually in the place where you're supposed to be. And one of the Hasidim took it very to heart and was crying. So the Rebbe Shab said to him, "What are you crying on Simchas Torah for?" And he added, "If you're crying on Simchas Torah, you must have been laughing when you said Al Chet on Yom Kippur." In other words, everything has its time. That was the time for that, and now is the time for this. So that means that whatever we draw down into the world spiritually on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur through tshuva, we draw that down on the Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah through simcha. I want to touch on another point, going now to the Simchas Torah booklet, is how it affects the rest of the world. So one of the things that happens on Simchas Torah is something called Ayin Purim, the 70 bulls. Look at page 3. To understand page 3, we'll turn to page 5, which is the source of the Medrash. It says like this. In the Torah, it says that during the 7 days of Sukkot, we bring a carbon of 70 bulls. How does that done? The first day of Sukkot, we bring 13 bulls. The second day, we bring 12. The third day, we bring 11. The fourth day, we bring 10. And it keeps going down. And finally, on the 7th day, altogether, it's going to add up to 70 bulls. What does it correspond to? It corresponds to the 70 nations of the world, which means the sustenance of the 70 nations of the world comes from the Beis Hamikdash for what we do on Sukkot. And in fact, the Gemara says if the non-Jews would know what kind of brachas they get from the Beis Hamikdash, not only they never would have destroyed it, they would have surrounded it with legions of soldiers to protect it, that it should never be destroyed. But unfortunately, they had no clue what the Beis Hamikdash does for them. So after 7 days, bringing 70 bulls, comes the last day, Shmini Atzeres, and the last day, it says in the Chumash, should be 1 young bull and 1 ram. You see it on page 4. So this is the Medrash, page 5. I'll read it in the Hebrew. Mashal Melech, this is compared to a king. Sh'asa Suda, he made a big feast, Shivas Yamim, for 7 days. The Zimin Kol B'nai Avim Shel Medina. He invited all the people in the whole country for Shivas Yimei HaMishta, to have 7 days of celebration. Kivin Shavu Shivas Yimei HaMishta, once the 7 days of celebration ended, so now he gave the whole country the opportunity to celebrate. Omar Lo'eva, he turned to his most close, intimate friend whom he loved, and he said to them, I now accommodated the whole country, but now me and you, let's just celebrate personally together, because we're close, intimate friends. And for us, we don't need 70, we don't need big things. Mitra bus, a little piece of meat, a little piece of a fish, a little vegetable, and that'll be fine. What's the mashal? Hashem said to the Bnei Yisrael that up until now we had the 70 bulls, and that's sustenance for the 70 nations. But on the 8th day, at Tzeres Tiolachem, we don't need much. 1 bull and 1 ram, and so on and so forth, just a little bit. So basically, this is the time in the year that Hashem gives hashpah to the 70 nations. And because there are 70 nations, that's why there's 70 bulls. The only problem is when you count the nations, there's not always 70 nations, there's more. Even today, I think there's 120 nations. So the way it's explained in the Chassidus is that in the Chumash, there are definitely 70 nations. And these 70 nations are the source of all other nations, which means if there's another 50, 60 nations, they're branches of these 70. The 70 are the basic primary nations, and all the rest are branches and extensions of some of the 70. Which nation comes from which, we don't know. But it does say in the Sikha, in many Sikhas, starting from the Rebbe Rashab, that there's no doubt that the countries that are bigger countries, more influential countries, and he mentions like America, France, Russia, England, these countries, they are definitely from the 70. And then there are other countries, the smaller countries or less influential countries, they're probably branches of one of the 70 countries. So, of course, this hasn't changed. And the reason why it's 70 is, there's a deeper reason, because it says that all the nations of the world, their sustenance comes through 70 angels that are called the 70 ministering angels, that through them, Hashem gives sustenance to all the 70 nations. So that number never changes. What changes is just whether it is one branch or two branches or three branches, but it's definitely always 70 branches, 70 nations. What's interesting is that Sukkot's time, this time of the year, if you're a little bit familiar with the news, is with his big celebrations and big things going on in the United Nations. And one of the reasons for that is the fact it was a historic year, Tavshin Lamed Aleph, which was 1970. The United Nations, this time of the year, was celebrating 25 years since the establishment of the United Nations, which I guess was established in 1945, right after the war. What happened that year was very heavenly. In Hasidic language, we say it was sort of a Baal Shem Tov kind of event, where the Rebbe said, the 70 nations are getting together. Who knows what they'll come up with? So we have to make our own United Nations and make our own decisions. And he started to look around the room and he said, who are the real Balabatim, who are the real rulers in each country? The Gemara says, Man Malke Rabbanan, who are the kings? The Rabbanan, the Torah scholars. So he turned to one person and said, you are the head of France. You're the head of America. You're the head of Egypt. You're the head of England. You're the head of Russia. He went through a lot of different countries, pointed different people there. I remember there was somebody from Belgium, there was Silverstein, and the Rebbe said, do you have smicha? You know, smicha is what you need to be able to be a rabbi. And he was a man in his 60s probably. He said, no. So, do you accept upon yourself to do smicha this year? He said, yeah. Well, yeah, of course, yeah. And he took smicha, he became the head of Belgium. And the Rebbe's brother-in-law, Rashad, he traveled with the Frierdiker Rebbe when he went to Egypt, so he appointed him to be the head of Egypt. And then the Rebbe said, and now the United Nations will make a decision. Eretz Yisrael belongs to the Yidden. We don't give away 1 inch of a piece of land. This is the land that Hashem promised us. And whoever agrees should say, Amen, or L'chaim. And of course, the whole crowd shouted L'chaim and Amen. And a few times throughout the Farbrengen, then as Simchas Torah, the Rebbe referred to the United Nations. Also, at one point, he told, the term the Big Four. The 4 countries are called the Big Four. They should say L'chaim, and it was a heavenly kind of a thing that we established the United Nations to counteract that United Nations. And right now, it's also going on in the United Nations decisions. Unfortunately, it's all against Israel. The whole United Nations is one big anti-Semitic place, but nevertheless, the Eibishter runs the world, and this is the time of the year that the opposite happens. Hashem gives hashpah to elevate the 70 nations, and we'll see that happen in Mirz Hashem. It's just interesting to know that the Jewish nation is also based on the number 70. Where do we see that we have to do with, we're 70? Because normally it's 600,000. What? Right. It says in Chumash, when the Jews went down to Mitzrayim, there were 70 people. That was the sort of the origin of the Jewish nation, 70. And that's one of the reasons why the menorah, which represents the Jewish people, has 7 branches. even though there's 12 tribes, or there's Cohen, Levi, Yisrael, but the number 7 comes from the fact that we are based on the 70 people that went out to Mitzrayim. And the reason for the number 70 is because our real basis is number 7. What's that? We all come from Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, and 7. Okay, we have one more class in the afternoon before Yom Kippur, but we'll probably continue more with Simchas Torah. To be continued. Okay.
Tomorrow we have.
Tomorrow is no class, no.
When we have.
Tomorrow, the next class is going to be Friday, just for two classes, 10:30 to 12.
Oh, yeah, I have, I know. Actually, I think more.
Thank you.
You'll have classes for it, but that's. Last year, I don't know, like, I think we want more. I am something more good. You know, I don't know, since, so I decent enough, it's like. You are doing also, or not. Yeah, with my stuff too.